Good afternoon, everyone. Bill Blanchick here. Welcome to the special webinar Wednesday. We'll be talking about 7 important things you need to know investing in a COVID economy with my special guest, Lena Bellamayo, MBA and the Chief Strategist at FMCP and Go Home Buyers Unite, a website dedicated to helping both consumers and investors go buy real estate. And he's going to talk about what you need to know about investing in a COVID economy. So go ahead, Lena Bellamayo. Take it over.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me today, Bill. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about very important things in a very precarious time. What I'd like to do is really focus on 7 key areas to consider as we move forward into this recovery phase, so that we can make the most of the data available to us and really make good decisions. So with that, let's get going. So the 7 things that I have seen to be the most important to consider have really come to me by way of some of our industry experts. For example, Lawrence Yun, who is the chief economist for the National Association of Realtors, has an army of research scientists who work every week to really examine what's happening and really provide us with the most up-to-date information quantitatively to help us. And so what I've done is I've taken that and some of the other data from other experts, and I've put together these 7 areas to consider for us as we navigate this post-COVID recovery. And on the screen, you can see the 7 areas that I'm going to be talking to, and really it's all the logical elements that we would want to know about. What's changed? How does that affect my position? What is my position? What kind of criteria do I want to be considering when I'm making decisions? Are there markets that are more, present more opportunity than others? And then, of course, my particular area of interest is how do I make the most of my resources? How do I extend my resources? And I'll be talking to that point very specifically. And then, of course, when to buy and what to do. Is there a time that is better than others to consider? And then, of course, next steps. So that's kind of the flow of our talk today. And let's get started with looking at what's changed. Clearly, we're at a place in our economy that is unprecedented, clearly. We had a large event in 2008 where the market went through an incredibly painful time because of some decisions by lenders, and really that was something that had been developing over time. But this particular economic event is government imposed. We've had this stay-at-home order that has affected jobs, our economy, our ability to interact with one another, how we do business. And clearly our new distance environment and our new normal has had an impact on our economy, no doubt. We've had to move from, in-person meetings to more digital processes. We've had video chats, video tours, e-documents. My inclination is that type of digital environment will continue for a while. But we all know that housing is important and it is a necessity. And so buying and selling will continue. At what pace we'll talk about, and I'll share what I know. And then we'll begin to look at what timing looks like for us in the marketplace. A short side note, you'll see in this slide, it says Apple 1998 story. So in 1998, I worked for Apple Computer, and they were talking then with professionals about video tours. And it wasn't something that was adopted at that time. But then, of course, fast forward to today, and it is our new normal. And I mention that only because I want to put in the back of our mind and plant the seed that timing is everything. You can have a great idea, you can have a great approach, but if it's not timed properly, it may not prosper. And so we're going to talk about timing in this new normal. The third point here is that we have this incredible unemployment that is even bigger than that number now. It's beyond 30 million. That's a very alarming number. A large number of people are not employed, and some of those workers will not return back to their prior positions. So that is going to present a challenge. Item 4 speaks to something that I think we or somebody we know in our immediate circle is experiencing: fear and uncertainty. What will happen? What will this new normal present to us? And I like to focus on the facts and not really spend a whole lot of time with, the fear. Let's look at what the numbers say to us, and then we'll make decisions. Finally, the last bullet is really talking about what is the obvious. We've had government mandates that are preventing a lot of action by landlords for, evictions, et cetera. And that's going to loosen up, and so that will not present the same challenge that it has last month. So let's dig a little deeper. So this chart here is pretty telling. This is the most recent chart from the National Association of Realtors research team. And you'll see they've presented a baseline of 2019 against their 2020 forecast of 2020 and 21. And 2021, and you'll see that there is some very interesting numbers here. We've had GDP, obviously, we were doing okay, and then the bomb of COVID hit, and the aftermath is awful. Job gains, obviously, down and awful. And I predict, and based on my interaction with those numbers and those experts, we're going to have a pretty awful Q2 for 2020. And that's simply because we're going to be feeling the pains of this slow recovery. In the home price section, though, and this is where I want for us as a group to focus for just a moment, we are moving into this slow open when it comes to businesses and returning to work. It will take a little time. So Q2 is going to be just awful, but beyond that, we'll begin a slow move up into our new normal. Home prices, you'll see in 2020, are going to probably remain at 0% increase to a slight 2%. Not bad. But then as we get confident and as things begin to grow, you'll see in 2021, their forecast is a 1 to 3%. Also, not a big shift, but definitely something to consider. And so if you were looking to consider a purchase, I am not saying there's going to be a fire sale, no. But there may be some opportunities in some markets that may be better timed than others to do sooner rather than later. Let's look at a couple more charts.
Good time
just
to buy
to provide some context.
I was saying good.
Absolutely, yeah.
Condo in
so
New York,
here's the numbers.
all running away.
That's right. That's right. So this is their projections for home sales and really what's happened. And interestingly enough, you'll see that 2018-19 are pretty standard. I mean, they're pretty much the static same there. You'll see it's not a lot of movement. Q1 2020, we were doing okay. And then, of course, the COVID bomb. But now look at our Q2, 3, and 4. So this is brutal. The Q2 is negative 39. So the projections are between 30 and 50% down. And that's a very precarious time. People are going to be getting out of the fog, determining what their next opportunities are and making that shift. But you'll see Q3 and 4 are projected to do much better, still in that recovery phase. And so my inclination is to produce, to provide some caution as we go. And the reason I'm doing this presentation is because I want to provide some elements to consider for those periods of time. So as we progress through, you'll see some of that is weaved in. So what's my position? Clearly there's timing, and then there's bad timing. And so we want to be prepared if this is your time. And believe me when I say there are plenty of opportunities to buy in this particular environment, but doing it smartly is going to make all the difference in reducing your risk and increasing the opportunity for success in your portfolio. So when it comes to what's your position, I believe this is not exhaustive, but this is simply some key areas to consider. And from left to right, you'll see the usual suspects, right? Do I have reserves? Bill talks about that in case of an emergency. You don't want to be so extended that you have no reserve. So clearly in this environment, and with the conversations around, should there be a second wave, which no one really knows. But no matter what, we've learned one lesson here, and that is be prepared. And so have some reserves. Think smartly in this time. The second area going to the right there is, do I have a strong enough debt income and credit score? It's not a surprise that the lenders are tightening up their requirements. We have great rates, but you have to earn them. And so if you are doing a purchase on your own, if you are co-buying, if you are refinancing, there are going to be some requirements that are going to be, a tick above what was provided before. So be prepared for that. Specifically, if you're doing a co-buy, you want to buy a property in a thriving environment where there'll be steady renters and where there's good economies of scale. In that particular case, I would say you want to look for a partner who has a very good income, debt, and credit portfolio. So food for thought. The other two remaining are obviously, are you flexible with location? As I mentioned, some locations are going to do better than others. What is your tolerance for going outside of your market? And then, do you want to buy now or do you want to wait? Like I said, and like we just seen, Q3 and 4 are going to be better, but would you be better served to be on the front end on the last part of Q2, early Q3? It's up to you. But these are things you need to consider when it comes to what's your position. And as we progress on, this is what I was speaking to earlier. What's the criteria? How do I, as a smart investor, and clearly if you're on this call, you're making the most of your time by looking to gather as much information as possible, and I applaud that. Here are some things to think about in your portfolio of decision-making tools. First, what is the number of sales of existing homes? How is that market doing? Clearly, you want to look a little, obviously before the COVID bomb into the current state as well, and even forward. What are the prices of existing homes? The volume of new construction? What's the local economy like? What's the population trending like? Are people moving there for industry expansion, et cetera? What is the unemployment rate? I mean, clearly we're now in recovery and there's going to be large numbers of unemployment, but we're going to be able to see where those folks are going back to work and where they're not. Job growth opportunities, of course, the ever important median household income, your affordability in that marketplace, of course, and then what's your preference, because we all have a preference. So on this list, I would urge you to take these pieces and put them together and connect the dots when you're deciding where you want to invest and your timing for that investment. So I know we're going along pretty quick, but I wanted to give you an example of how you can use that list of criteria to help your decision making. This is just 4. There's several others. I believe there's a list of 25 top markets to consider. And if you'd like that list, you can shoot me a message and I'll be happy to share that and this data with you. My information will be at the end of this presentation. But here's 4 markets to consider. Not probably top of mind for most people, but a couple of those elements of criteria consideration that I mentioned in the previous slide, I've attached here. So let's look at them. Austin, Texas. The median household price there, $296. But they have a high population growth. What does that mean? I interpret that to mean that there's going to be a high demand for rent, and there's going to be some issues with possible affordability, but definitely inventory. And so there's an opportunity there to say, okay, I know the baseline, and I also feel comfortable that they'll be competitive. It'll be a competitive environment for renters, so I'm likely to get someone who is trustworthy after whatever vetting process you put them through. And it looks like the population will support the investment. In Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, a beautiful place. We look at two key indicators there, medium household price, 238. But here's something interesting specific to this market. Job growth and opportunity. They have a high number of technology companies and startups that are continuing to grow there. It's becoming a hub of sorts. And so we know that the level of skilled labor in that environment and their income is going to support an investment in that community. Likewise, the last two, Lakeland, Florida, and Grand Rapids, Michigan, for different reasons. Lakeland is outside of the primary city locations, but not too far to drive. Many people are considering a longer commute to get a better opportunity to purchase. So there we see it's $161K for their medium home prices. And they're expected to grow by 7%. I think it was one of the top few with that large of an expected growth percent. So definitely something to think about. And then finally, Grand Rapids. Same thing, medium household price, it's reasonable, but they have an Amazon fulfillment center there. And that's definitely going to bring in some workforce numbers that can support an investment in that community. So I've only listed 4, obviously several others, but I would urge you to take that consideration, that list into consideration, and look at those markets carefully and find those opportunities that make sense for you. So here we go. How do you extend your resources? So I mentioned earlier, what's your position? You want to reserve, you want to buy smartly, you want to invest in areas where you feel that there is opportunity for growth and where your investment will thrive. The other part is, how do I take this finite resource that I have by way of investment dollars and make the most of it? You can refinance your current properties. Of course, many people are doing that. That's the low-lying fruit. You can buy while you see opportunities in Q2 and 3. That's fine. Use that SMART criteria. You can take advantage of lowering your investment risk and percent by doing it through a co-buying platform. And that's where I come in, right? So in our economy, we have been challenged. 48% increase in income. In cost of housing, and only a 15% increase in income. It's incredible. The cost of higher education has increased 8 times, eightfold over the last 10 years. So many other things have become more expensive. I don't need to remind anybody of that. That's the obvious. But the question is, how do we make the most of what we have? And one of the ways to do that is through a very smart, calculated co-buying opportunity. We've been doing co-buying for years. People have bought with friends, family members, loved ones, children, grandchildren, not any different than today. However, today, we have a platform that will provide you with the process and some very specific tools to help you do it with what we call confidence. And that means mapping out very specifically that investment agreement from the time you enter into it, the equity sharing, and all the way through to the potential exit. People do not do that, and then there becomes frustration and conversation on the back end should an event happen: job loss, illness, divorce, relocation, etc. So it's very important to have that in a nicely organized legal document so that there's no surprises and there is preparation on the front end. So finally, the last option here for extending your resources is, do I do nothing? Do I wait? Do I, sit back like everyone else and wait? And while we see the 0 to 1% price increase in, the latter part of Q2, early Q3, do I wait and do nothing and then see that those prices go up slightly and miss that window? It's up to you. I would say if you're ready to buy and you are at the time, at this moment in a place where you want to consider it, I would say you should move forward into the discovery phases and examine your options.
Yeah, I also think interest rate is a consideration. Interest rates are falling to new lows and might even fall lower by June, July. Do you buy now at a lower interest rate, or do you wait for potential foreclosures to hit the market in 6 months to a year, pay less, but maybe pay a higher interest rate?
Yeah, nope, that's exactly right. And here's another look at that chart because I want to create the visual in our minds. But so we have interest rates that are good. Obviously you have to have that qualification requirements met. But here we are. We're talking about this 0 to 2%. And it's you got to pick the right market, and you have to really find that opportunity that makes sense for you. But it's going to move up. And so the question is, I can take advantage of some lower interest rates, and I can also look at, buying where there's not an increase in cost as much as it may be going forward. So it's definitely a time to consider. I would say that there are risks and there are smart risks, calculated risks. And I would encourage you to examine all opportunities and make smart choices. That's why we're all here providing data and not just opinion. But definitely we can see, if you look at the home sales and you see how we're moving forward, it's definitely people are going to be taking advantage of this time. The question is, will that be you? And is it the right time for you, really? So here's our next steps. I like to always, invite people to participate in learning more because that's how we make good decisions. Our next steps here are really fourfold. And I mentioned them earlier. Do I want to do a co-buy? Do I have a partner? Do I need to get one? How do I get going? Do I want to wait and then, possibly get myself ready for, Q3 or beyond? Do I want to sell what I have now because I feel like I'm not in the right market, and I may want to move to one of those more promising communities where I see, larger numbers of people based on economies and business opportunities? That's a question too. Do I want to move my portfolio around into those markets that are more prosperous, away from those markets that maybe are not scheduled to prosper? Or do I want to do nothing? So I would say that all those things are clearly on an individual basis decisions that need to be considered. But as I mentioned, this particular presentation and my data, I am happy to share and more with anyone who wants to reach out to me. You can find my contact information at gohomebuyersunite.com. And you can also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Lena Belamayo. But I guess that's what I want to share today, Bill. So I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, let's, if you have some questions, you can pop them into the comment there and ask Lena Belamayo any questions about the presentation or any data that we've covered so far. And just as a commentary, very good, good overview of the options available. I would say number 4, do nothing, would be a big mistake. You're going to either sharpen those claws now and wait, a couple of months for potential bargains, or you could get involved now or in the second quarter, early third quarter, because I think this summer we're going to see some, even though overall the market's going to go up, in the long run, a little bit in 2020, probably some of that has to do with the first quarter. But 2021, things will recover in most markets. I say most markets because, like New York, New Jersey, not so much.
Yeah.
Florida, people are running from New York to go to Florida and say, wow, get me out of the city where I'm quarantined and give me warm weather or where they know how to take care of, and handle the virus, which they did very well in Florida because their numbers are much better. So I think markets like that are going to do very well. Like Lakeland, Florida, very, very good option. East of Tampa there, west coast of Florida, very good area for growth. I think that the west coast of Florida never really fully recovered from the last as much as Miami, Boca, Fort Lauderdale, et cetera, on the East Coast. So I think there's some huge opportunities on the west coast of Florida and some of the central areas as well. We have here, of course, some curious, any additional markets recommended given the drop in the price of oil? How's that going to affect Texas? I think that's just temporary, though. I don't know. I think Texas is still an net in-migration. Temporarily, they're going to have some, people in the oil market maybe being laid off. I don't know about you, but I don't see that really affecting Texas' real estate market much.
I don't either, except for the obvious that, we know that people are not doing a lot of driving, obviously, with our stay-at-home order. And that's affected the amount of consumption for that particular commodity, which is, of course, obvious at the gas pump. Our prices have gone down drastically. $26
and I'm sorry.
Yeah. But I would say that like many other industries, I would predict, and this is, I was listening to a couple of other economists, and they were saying that as we progress forward across those industry indexes, that we'll see small incremental improvements over time because we're actually moving incrementally into a more open economy. And so I would say that we can imagine logically that would happen across those different verticals.
Right. James has a question. What about Midwest? Well, I don't know if Michigan is really the Midwest. Is it? Or that's the Great Lakes? Ohio is the Rust Belt, but I guess that's the Rust Belt. Ohio, Pennsylvania, all the way through Michigan. What about those areas?
So, I would say that when I put that list of considerations together, I looked at many markets. And that list is, I think, a pretty solid way to evaluate those areas. Right. Some may do better than others against that list and those requirements. But I would say definitely keep them as you look at those markets. Check them off the list. Is the economy growing there? Do we see businesses thriving? What's the job and employment situation? Are there indicators in those markets that cause me to have some optimism, or am I concerned that they may not do as well? And I think that's the long view. And I think we can look at this now and then the long view. And when you're investing in real estate, we want a long view. And so use that list carefully and tick that off as you go along.
Yeah, in Michigan, you can't trim your lawn or your hair right now, so I don't know about that. But Ohio's a mix. You got Dayton, which is and then you've got Columbus, which is fantastic. So really, you have to use those factors that were laid out for city by city, submarket by submarket. Neighborhoods within, or areas within a city. This suburb versus that suburb, and really evaluated on a case by case basis.
And you have to consider that businesses and executives, and I've worked in diligence for M&A with a variety of different Fortune 500 companies over the years, and they think a lot like consumers, right? So we're looking to build, let's say I am working to do some diligence for a potential M&A for a big company. We're going to go and we're going to examine the market. What's the opportunity? What's the cost to do business there? And in the very same way, businesses, for example, in Raleigh-Durham, who knew a technology hub? I would have never guessed such a thing in Raleigh-Durham. But I am positive, considering what I just said, that there are many companies who are saying, look, it's low cost to do business there. And we can ship, we can deliver digitally. It doesn't matter where we set up our operations. Let's find a place where we can thrive economically. And so they're looking at those markets where there's opportunities to thrive and where the cost to invest is a lower threshold as well. So those are big indicators. And so when you think about the criteria, go back to the list. It's a good list.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Bill Mayo, put your slide. Oh, your slide is over, so I can't put it back up. I'm sorry. But they can reach you at, what's your email again?
So you can find us at gohomebuyersunite.com.
GoHomeBuyersUnite.com. Thank you, everyone, for joining. This is being recorded, obviously, being streaming on YouTube. You can watch the replay and stop by Lena Bellamayo's website at HomeBuyersUnite.com. Everyone, have a great day.
All right. Be well. Thank you.